child has grown up believing the only person who can help them and heal them is the person who's been hurting them.
Hey everyone, I hope everyone is doing good and taking good care of themselves. And before I start, I would request you all to like, share, subscribe the channel, and show love to the guest that we are having today. So, let me just, tell you guys a little bit, about the guest. So today I'm honored to be joined by Darren, a highly respected counselor based in Belfast, with many years of experience, supporting individuals, couples, and groups. And Darren practices an integrative approach, drawing from, CBT, person-centered, psychodynamic, and solution-focused therapies. And all of it is basically to help clients navigate complex challenges, which we all, do and experience at some point. He also helps, people, battling addiction, OCD, depression, anxiety, relationship struggles, and bereavement. He's an accredited professional registrant with the National Counselling and Psychotherapy Society, and an author of Surviving the Other People's Self-Esteem. Darren also provides supervision to other professionals and is trained in the rewind technique for PTSD. With his vast expertise in both therapeutic practice and mediation, Darren brings a unique perspective to understanding how narcissistic abuse impacts individuals and the lifelong path to healing. So let me welcome Darren. Darren, welcome to the Consciousness Dialogues. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for inviting me on, Sarah.
So much. Darren, please tell us a little bit about you. Why therapy, why helping people? For me, I was, really curious, to find answers to my questions. And that's how, I became a therapist. I would want to know what inspired you to, become a therapist.
I don't think there would be any one particular answer. I think it was a variety, a myriad of different things that led me into therapy. Having had therapy, attending therapy myself, I had worked with people in support roles. I'd facilitated groups, things like that, mentoring. I've been through my own troubles and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But I find people very, very interesting, very, very fascinating. And I think it's curious how you can have unique individuals with their own history and everything, and yet we all experience the same kind of thing. There's so many commonalities with us all, and it's not always the one path that leads us to where we are. And even if it is, it doesn't mean it's all going to affect us the same way. There's going to be so many different variables, so many different routes our experiences can take. So I just find people fascinating, and I think it's a really interesting area of work. I get to meet really interesting, fascinating people.
According to me, the things that I have studied and researched, I see that parent-child relationship, majorly, in a way forms a blueprint for all other future attachments.
Mm-hmm.
And now when that parent is a narcissist, I personally feel that the blueprint is messed up. The blueprint is fractured, from the start. Now, I would want to know, in your clinical view, what are the most defining long-term psychological imprints left on a child who are raised by narcissistic parent?
You're asking the easy questions first. It's within a narcissistic family. If you think of narcissism, it's an incredibly predictable kind of personality and how they behave and so on, and yet it can be very, very complex. It can manifest in different ways and so on. But if you think of that, you think of a family unit. So let's imagine you've got two parents, you've got a child, maybe a couple of children, maybe even 3 or 4.
Mm-hmm.
The dynamics that you would see in that one-to-one relationship with the partner, they're going to be playing out as well with the children. Quite often with narcissism, you have this, apart from all the entitlement and this belief that they're special and so on, they really need this constant affirmation, this constant attention, this constant love. And whenever they're in this family dynamic, if they're not getting it perhaps from the partner the way they once did, they might be rejecting the partner. The partner's never good enough. A lot of the things that people talk about in narcissistic videos, how they treat their partners and so on. With the children, what you often find is, maybe with one of the children in particular, the child becomes like a pseudo partner, if you will, a surrogate partner. So even at a young age, they might be getting told things that are very inappropriate. They might be expected to be the parent's counselor. What you often find as well is whenever a child might have a particular role, other roles might be assigned to the children as well. Other times the children are just going to take on roles because of how they're being treated. Now, depending on the role, these interactions, these behaviors, and how they learn to manage the world, how they learn to manage that interaction with their parents, with the narcissistic parent, even with each other, as I'm sure you were, a lot of these things are going to carry on into adulthood. So, for instance, you might have had the child who was commonly referred to as the golden child, the child that was separated from the others and was special. So that child might grow up believing that they are special and entitled and so on. You'll have the child who might have been blamed on all the family's misery. They were at fault for everything, commonly referred to as a scapegoat. You might find that child growing up, and that child might be, well, they might get into trouble, because they think it's their lot in life. Could go the other way. They could be very conflict avoidant, if you know what I mean. They really want to stay under the radar.
Mhm.
Which both leads me on to another child. You would have maybe the lost child. That's the child that wasn't really noticed at all. Maybe neglected, but maybe that child learned that it was safer to stay hidden. They didn't want to do so well that they were going to outshine the golden child, because there was going to be conflict there. There was going to be scorn, ridicule, bullying, things like that. Pardon me, I did tell you I have a cold. Um,
Perfect.
but they don't want to do so badly either that they end up the scapegoat, responsible for all the misery. They've let the family down and so on. So the child is learning to stay hidden in plain sight. They're doing really
Mhm.
well, but not too well, not badly either. So you might say that child would be reading, doing solitary activities, playing alone, things like that, just sitting in the room, listening to music, whatever. And again, as they grow up, it's not that they don't have interactions, it's not that they don't have friends or anything, but again, they kind of stay hidden in plain sight. They don't like conflict. They don't like putting themselves out there too much. They wouldn't necessarily put themselves up for a promotion at work, that sort of thing. They don't necessarily like attention, especially negative attention. So there are so many different avenues you could go down in how narcissistic parents affect kids, but I think a lot of the time it's going to affect their adult relationships as well, because they haven't maybe had a healthy relationship modeled for them.
Darren, you talked about the different roles. I
Mhm.
mean, scapegoat, golden child, invisible, lost child. I mean, who really assigns these roles? Who puts these children into these roles, into these categories? Or is there a situation that is engineered that the children take on this role? Or it's the parent who decides, who needs to be assigned a certain role? What are your thoughts, Darren?
I I don't think there's a one answer is going to answer. That's not a one size fits all answer. I
Mm-hmm.
think sometimes people fall into roles, just like we might fall into a role at work, even though we have a specific role to do. We might be the one that always make sure there's milk in the fridge or something, tea break time. We fall into different roles. In the families, you might find people fall into roles. I think where you have someone who is highly manipulative. Again, when you think of narcissism, it's on a spectrum. It's not a one size fits all answer, but you might have someone who is just selfish and self absorbed. But then other times you do have someone who is highly manipulative. So they will have a favorite child. And I don't have anything to back this up, but these are just my thoughts.
Mhm.
Commonly, that child is the one who maybe looks like them the most, if you know what I mean. Could
Mhm.
be the eldest child or whatever, but
Mm.
it they would have that favorite child. That child is going to be separated from the others, not necessarily given all the best toys. That can be the case, but they might be separated from the others in the sense that why can't you be more like him? Why can't you be more like her? So
Mm.
the other siblings are compared unfavorably to them.
Mhm.
You might have that scapegoat child, the scapegoat who is, again, responsible for all the family's misery. And again, I've nothing to back this up. These are just my thoughts.
Mhm.
Sometimes that can be the child who looks like the other parent who is now their enemy, if you know what I mean, because they're not as perfect as they once were, and so on. Um, Sometimes they can be engineered. When they are engineered, what I would suggest is what you find is the rules shift and change. So there's like
Mm.
a competitive kind of environment within the children. So there might be a default setting. Child A is the golden child. Child B is the scapegoat. But
Mhm.
then child B might do very well at school. And even if it's just like they got 10 out of 10 in the test or they're going to get an award or something, for that brief period, they become the golden child. So it's going to shift and change.
Mhm.
Other times it's like a default. Sometimes you would have the parent who it doesn't matter what the children do, even if it is the golden child. They don't really take it under their notice. So there's like neglect, if you know what I mean, not paying attention to the child's abilities, the things they're learning, the things they're doing. Maybe unkind humor, criticism whenever they make mistakes or they get it wrong, or even punishment or so on. But it really depends on the parent. As I said, sometimes you just have someone who's so self-absorbed they can't really see outside of themselves. So you're really looking at neglect and things like that. Other times you can have someone who is very manipulative. And you will find families, narcissistic families, if that's the case, they work very, very like cults. As much as they want to show a unified front, they do believe very much in divide and conquer. So they don't want everybody being on the same side. They want them scrabbling with each other. They want some kind of
Mhm.
competitiveness in order to gain their favor.
True. I would like to add something over here. I was, the golden child. And then, I was stripped of that title,
Mm,
because I was not doing what they wanted me to do. And I could see, right in front of me, my sister, being,
mm,
assigned the golden child then. And she was starving. She was just hungry, starving for the attention. She was the one
yeah,
who was neglected, and she was waiting for that right time that I will get the promotion. I mean, almost like an office promotion that we get at workplaces. And when I took a stand for myself, I could see things changing. I could
mhm,
see her competing, doing extra, going extra mile to
yeah.
serve them better. And one fine day she was conferred with that title, that now you are the new golden child. And um, I personally have seen, working with other individuals also, there is this change that happens. I mean, it's not that you will die as a golden child. If you, at any point of time, if you prioritize yourself or if your priorities change, you might be stripped of that title. Now, I would want to know, Darren, have you observed such a thing, working with, your clients?
Um, Not necessarily with my clients, but in everyday life, I've seen this.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
the golden child's crown is very precarious. It's very dependent.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how they behave, how they interact, the things they achieve, how the family is viewed through them. Remember, the parent is living vicariously through them.
Mm-hmm.
That crown is very precarious. If, again, one of the other siblings maybe does better, it's either going to be ridiculed, scorned, sabotaged, things like that, because it brings up envy, the jealousy, things like that. Um, there are some people, and I'm curious, from what you've just said. It's the thing about the children that grow up in narcissistic families. This is not unusual. I've seen this twice in my life in two different families that didn't even know each other.
Mm-hmm.
The children, once they started to grow up, one family had 3 children, the other family had 2.
Mm-hmm.
Once they started to grow up and they started to see it for what it was, they recognized it, and then they started watching YouTube, and everything started falling into place. Once they saw it for what it was, and they recognized how most of their lives they had been pitted against each other. There was a lot of petty jealousy, what they often call things like pseudo hostility within
Mm-hmm.
narcissistic families. Once they saw what it was, they actually started to band together against the parents. They're
Mm.
not necessarily against them in this adversarial sense, but every time the parents tried to do something, they were united. So I
Wow.
think that is, I would like to think that's more common than you think.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever the kids realize what's really going on when they grow up. And if you think about it, as kids grow up, they start to learn about relationships, not just from mum and dad. They learn it from their friends in school. They learn it when they start dating. They learn it from television shows they're watching. They learn it from their friends' families. They learn it from people they work with, and then they maybe find partners themselves. So they're starting to learn different kinds of relationships, and they realize that this, what we grew up with, we were told that this was right and this is normal, and everybody else were the villains. Everyone else has it wrong. Actually, it's the other
Mm-hmm.
way around. Actually,
Mm-hmm.
it's the other way around. And I would like to think that that is more common than maybe we hear about. Maybe I'm wrong, but there is part of me always hopes. I would like to think that. I'm just curious when you said about no longer having that crown and all. How was that for you to lose that crown? Is it something you were
Well,
okay with, or is
it
it
was
something you
it was
struggled
it was really, yeah. I mean, it was very painful. That, I mean, you're getting all the visibility, and all of a sudden you're just treated like a furniture. I mean,
with?
no love for you, no attention for you, no special treatment. You are, your needs are catered the last, and the new golden child is the topmost priority. So I mean, it almost felt like being abandoned. I was so important, I was so valuable, and I'm just, a piece of crap lying in the house. I mean, in some
Mm.
corner. I mean, I felt betrayed. I mean, if
That's
you know what I mean.
and
Hmm.
that's interesting you use that word abandonment, because that is one of the things that narcissistic people target. And again, whether it's a conscious or an unconscious thing they do, that need we have for approval and accept. I'll start
Hmm.
that again. That need for approval and acceptance, and when that is withdrawn, held back, deliberately withheld, even that
Hmm.
triggers something in us, especially a child. That fear of abandonment, that fear of rejection.
Hmm.
Why they, not even the kids, even partners, there is that part of us that thinks, well, if I work that little bit harder and if I comply just that little bit more, I'd get it back.
Maybe I'll earn back the title.
And if you think about it, that's actually, that's one of the things that fuels the trauma bond. On one,
Absolutely.
on one hand, there is that need for the approval, the fun, the little gifts, the little
Hmm.
jokes, the affection, and that gives us a sense of ease. Sometimes it gives us a dopamine hit, things like that. But on the other
Hmm.
side of that, you're in this constant state of stress and strain, waiting for the next rejection, waiting for the next explosion. What you did today was perfectly okay, but you know that if you do the same thing tomorrow, there's a huge chance you might get an explosion. You might step on a landmine or something. You might get punished because the discipline is often inconsistent. So
Hmm.
when we're in that constant state of strain and worry and things like that, there's the adrenaline, there's the cortisol and things like that, but we're trying to get the good stuff that's going to ease that.
Hmm.
There's the trauma bond, keep going back for more, because, and especially with children, if you think about it, again, the highly manipulative narcissistic people are very good at doing this, the way they condition people. But a child has been there since birth. It's like they lead people to believe the only person who can heal them, the only person who can help them, is the same person who hurts them.
True. So true. That's there. And also, I have seen, Darren, you talked about this trauma bonding, intermittent reinforcement, withholding love and affection and attention and validation. I get that. But there is one more, thing that I have observed, in my case and working with others, is, when parents are oversharing information, whether it's personal in
Yeah,
nature or, other kinds, oversharing. I mean, suppose I am a 5-year-old and they are talking, about things which they should talk, with their age group.
yeah,
That further creates, a very unhealthy, toxic kind of an enmeshment, or, I mean, in some cases
yeah,
I have seen, clearly leading to, emotional incest, like your
yeah,
father is this, your mother is this. I mean, go ahead and talk to an adult. Why a 6-year-old? Why a 10-year-old? And I have seen that plays an important role when it comes to entraining the child, since childhood. And
mm,
trauma bonding, emotional incest, and all that playing victim. And, it creates a kind of a bond. That kind of a bond I have, severed, when I, went no contact with my family. It's really painful. And I would like to add
yeah,
something over here. Um, Emotional incest, a lot of people, I mean, a lot of therapists also, they feel that it happens between, opposite gender, a father with the
mm,
daughter, a mother with the son. But I have seen it happening between a daughter and a mother also,
yeah,
because, yeah, I mean, I have seen certain really, extreme cases, where sex was present as well. But in majority of the cases, sex is not there. It's just that the boundaries are blurred. You're treated like
yeah,
an adult.
yeah. And within narcissistic families, well, narcissistic people, they tend to struggle with boundaries, shall we say. I mean, other people's boundaries are an inconvenience to them, but that includes their own children. You're right. The children are treated like adults. Sometimes they're treated like the parent's therapist,
Yeah,
their advisor. Sometimes they're the surrogate partner. They're
absolutely.
being told information that the kids probably don't even know what half of it means, but they know it's not good. And again, trying to get that parent's approval.
Mm-hmm.
When you see the mum or the dad, whoever it is, whenever you see them angry or upset or whatever it is, and the child, now children are going to do this anyway. In fact, most of us do this anyway. We have enough compassion. We don't want to see people struggling, but especially if it's mum or dad. And what can happen is the parent is telling you, "Oh, it was your dad. Your dad's a horrible person. Your dad did this, or your mum's a
Mm.
horrible, nasty person because they did that."
Mm-hmm.
And the child is learning um, this lack of boundaries. The child is learning to put the parents' needs over their own, and
Absolutely.
even within that family unit, even if the parents are still together, they're starting to view the other parent in a negative way. They're starting
Mm-hmm.
to, if you will, it's like parental alienation, but it's still taking place within the home. Now that other
Mm-hmm.
parent could have, they could just be going out to work. That's all it is. They're going out to work, but the other parent is, you should be earning money and staying at home to pay me attention and stuff. So they're looking really ridiculous things. But because the other parent won't or can't, they're now being portrayed as the villain, and the child is growing up seeing them as the villain, even though that parent might be loving, might be kind, might be trying to make up for the other parent, if you know what I mean. They're
Mm-hmm.
still being seen as the villain. Now, those children, whenever that enmeshment is taking place, in fact, even before that, I'll go a bit upstream from that. Within that family dynamic, things like boundaries, as I said, they're an inconvenience. They're a bad thing. You shouldn't have them because mum knows best or dad knows best or whatever, and
Mm-hmm.
you shouldn't have secrets and so on. And those children are learning up, are growing up learning to put other people's needs, other people's feelings in front of their own needs, second guessing themselves. Am I being selfish? Am I being wrong for thinking this? Am I doing whatever? So they're putting other people in front of themselves, and that's where we can see a lot of people pleasing behaviors. That's where we can see a lack of assertiveness as well.
Mm-hmm. True.
And you mentioned about the information. Another thing that's common the mum or the dad, whoever it is, will have no problem sharing private information about the kids just to embarrass them. Now we're not
Mm.
now we're not talking about a 16-year-old who brings home a girlfriend or a boyfriend or whatever.
Mhm.
Mum
Mhm.
and dad make a joke and pull out a picture of him with his
Mhm.
toy Darth Vader when he was 5. We're not
Mhm.
talking about that sort of thing. Um, telling strangers, telling their friends, telling all the things they've done wrong, all of the things they've done bad, and discussing right in front of them, discussing the stuff that's
Or
going on.
maybe mocking their
And
vulnerabilities.
yeah, that's pretty much what it is. It's mocking
Mhm.
their vulnerabilities. So
Mhm.
they're learning to become very, very closed, not to share anything. To share anything could be used against you.
Mhm.
Find it
True.
difficult. They find it difficult to ask for help because to ask for help, it might be used to ridicule them. Yeah. So
Mhm.
there is that oversharing of information. It's also showing that lack of privacy. It's showing that lack of respect, and it's not teaching healthy boundaries. The kids aren't learning to be able to say no in a healthy
Mm.
because
True.
it's all about the parent.
Mhm. True. And also, I mean, Darren, you said, that in narcissistic families, these narcissistic parents are, um, expert in pitting, relatives
Mm,
against each other, mom, dad, or
yeah.
mom, child, or father, child. That's a common thing. Now, there is, one more interesting thing to that phenomena when they are, I mean, like I grew up in a extremely narcissistic household. Uh, for some period of time, I knew that my daddy was a villain and my mother was a helpless lamb that I need to protect and, serve.
Mm,
But the moment I took charge and control, and she sensed that I'm trying to outgrow, I was the villain then. And then, she ganged up with dad and they both became the bestest of the friends. So, it almost transformed. He was the villain. I mean, though he
yeah.
was a grandiose as well, and all of a sudden they are friends and they are against, a common enemy. So that phenomena is also there. I mean, what are your thoughts about that, Darren?
Um, do you know what? I don't think you could write that. That just sounds that's how it works. Yeah. Pitting people against each other. It's like my enemy's enemy is my friend. Think about that need for attention and for validation. Now, if they can't get it in the good way, they'll get it in the negative way. But even someone that they might have a grudge against, that person suddenly becomes very useful whenever
Mm.
there's someone else target.
Mhm.
This is the thing about that sense of victimhood. You cannot be a victim unless you have some kind of villain.
Mm.
That's when the child
Makes
becomes the
sense.
villain.
Mhm.
After everything I've done for you, I sacrificed everything for you. Oh my goodness, look at me. There's no one like me. I've done all this. And you throw it back in my face. Is everyone paying attention? Yeah. Do you know what I mean? You cannot be this, even with the grandiose, you cannot be a hero unless you have some kind of villain to overcome. You cannot be a victim
Absolutely.
unless you have a villain that has made you a victim. So
Mhm.
everything gets projected outwards. Sometimes it will be the next door neighbor. Sometimes it'll be the boss in work. Sometimes it'll be Uncle Dave, who you haven't seen for
Mhm.
years, or it'll be the child. It'll always have to be someone. There's always someone to project all the stuff I don't like onto. That's the scapegoat, if you will.
Mhm. True. Darren, gaslighting, according to me, is like a love language of narcissistic parents. I mean,
Mm,
they gaslight you. I mean, they communicate that way. That's their style of communication. And what gaslighting does is that it really destabilizes you. It
yeah,
rips you from your core. You are
yeah,
unable to get in touch with your own self, and as a result of which, you face a lot of problem. And one such problem is doubting your own reality, because every time it was questioned, you
yeah.
were gaslit in return. Are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure people are going to laugh? I mean, all sorts of things, I have experienced and I have seen with, other victims also. Now, Darren, this um, this doubting, when you start doubting your own reality, I have seen the result, with
Mhm.
doubting your own self, your own reality. We often subconsciously take on, certain roles, that is, becoming a caretaker,
Mhm.
becoming, the punch bag, or becoming the jester and the joker and the fool who makes everyone happy and cracks,
Mhm.
stupid jokes, makes fun
Yeah.
of himself or herself, or the peacekeeper who is, trying to, maintain peace. Now, I would want to know how, I mean, according to you, how does this kind of role conditioning interfere with the development, of a stable identity in adulthood? What are your thoughts, Darren?
Well, I have a colleague who once described codependency in a way I've never heard it described before. I thought it was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
She refers to it as the dis-ease of the lost self. I thought that
Wow.
was really, really powerful way.
Mm-hmm.
So again, we have this need for connection. We're social creatures. We need to connect. We need to belong. And what happens is, again, our reality's being rewritten. We learn that maybe no is a bad word. We learn that publicly, think within a narcissistic family, publicly, we're wonderful. We are the best family there is. We are flawless. We are brilliant. Um, you know, uh, Behind closed doors, we know what we're living is a lie.
Mm-hmm.
And this brings up, sure, where this kind of cognitive dissonance in is. So
Yep.
we're knowing one thing to be true, but we're having to behave in a certain way. So we're not having a stable sense of reality when no is bad, what was good today is good, but the same thing tomorrow suddenly becomes bad because of that inconsistency. Because
Mm-hmm.
with that narcissistic parent, with that narcissistic parent, the child is often at the mercy of their whim. It's what is in their head at that moment is what's true and what is fact. So there is no stability, if you will, no stable sense
Mm-hmm.
of. I think, could be wrong, haven't looked enough into this. But I think that's one of the ways where codependency starts to form. The other person, it's that narcissistic parent needing that parent to give me a stable sense of self.
Mm-hmm.
When we grow up, when we start to meet other people, again, that codependency is there. I'm okay if you tell me I'm okay. I'll bring out the
Mm-hmm.
best in you because if I do that, then you'll see the best in me. Because it's very hard to recognize, actually, I'm okay because I feel okay. I'm doing okay. I haven't done anything wrong. And even if I did, it's not that big a deal. It's only a silly mistake. It's not whatever. But that has been completely kind of twisted, where any mistake is catastrophic. Doing anything for yourself is selfish. Saying no is the most horrible, cruel thing you could ever do. So that person is always looking outside of themselves for some kind of stability, needing a lot of reassurance. That's where you're going to find a lot of catastrophic thinking, a lot of predicting the future, mind reading, things like that. If you will, risk assessing behavior, risk
Mm-hmm.
and trying to avoid
Scanning for threats. Mm-hmm.
scanning for threats and trying to avoid anything that's going to bring up disapproval.
Mm-hmm. True. Darren, you talked about cognitive dissonance, and I mean, thanks to Leon Festinger, for bringing this, thing, to our notice and to the syllabus and to this domain. Um, don't you think? I have personally battled cognitive dissonance, and
Mm.
I know what it feels like when you are in that state. Darren, from a therapeutic standpoint, what do you think? I mean, do you think cognitive dissonance actually, how do I put it? I mean, do you think it complicates the healing process? Because I personally feel it does. It really
It
messes up
can.
your healing journey. And if you could tell us, how can we overcome that, and how difficult can cognitive dissonance be to resolve? What are your thoughts, Darren?
Well, it's always going to come down to the individual. It's always going to come down to how deeply ingrained something is. It's always there's so many variables. There isn't one answer I could
Mm-hmm.
give. But with cognitive dissonance, in fact, we were talking earlier. The child has grown up believing the only person who can help them and heal them is the person who's been hurting them.
Yep.
So there is already a dissonance there.
Mm.
The child is also, as now an adult, is starting to see other things in other people and on other relationships, and they don't necessarily have to earn positive regard. And if someone disagrees with them, they're not necessarily being rejected. They're still liked. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
So we're starting to see other things, and this is again, this can bring up another form of that dissonance. What you might find with the family, they've been led to believe that this sort of person is bad. People that work in that kind of place are bad, and people that say this kind of thing are bad. But they're starting to see other things. They're learning new experiences now. It depends on the person how open are they to these new experiences and these new relationships. Even being treated decently, the person in the shop serving you your coffee is nice and friendly. You're being treated like a decent human being. If we're not paying attention to those little things that we're not having to earn, it's just common decency and respect and things like that. If we're not paying attention to those little things, we're not really going to learn. We're not really going to grow. It's like the part of our brain is maybe going to reject it. But when we do start to pay attention to those little things, yes, that is going to bring up a dissonance in the sense that the things that we learned are the things that we were led to believe. That's the way I like to put it. Things we were led to believe are not necessarily true. And this is the thing about our beliefs. All our beliefs, doesn't matter what the belief is,
Mm-hmm.
they're either fact or feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if there's a third one, please share it with me. But to my best of my knowledge, they're either fact or feeling. And that doesn't
Absolutely.
mean one's better than the other. Doesn't mean one's
Mm-hmm.
better than the other. Sometimes those feelings may be based on facts that are no longer true. They might have been true at one point. For instance, you have to be in bed by 8:30. Okay, but you're not 10 years old anymore. Do you know what I mean? You're not a child anymore. You
Mm.
can go to bed anytime you want.
Mm.
Sometimes they may be based on things that were true at one point, but not necessarily relevant to this situation. For instance, I best not assert myself. This person's far too powerful, or this person's going to reject me. This person's going to hurt me. This person is not in an argument with you. This person could just be asking your opinion because they value your opinion. They're not trying to catch you out like maybe mum or dad did with those gotcha moments.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they are things that we were led to believe, but they were never true at all. So when we start to look at those beliefs and we start to examine them, we start to look at evidence for or against. I think we can give ourselves permission to be mistaken, to be wrong. We can give ourselves permission to take little, small, calculated risks in small, safe, little, measured ways to try something new. And some people, it might be a long process. It might be a long period of time. For some people, it's going to be a lot quicker. It might be an afternoon. But what can help is recognizing how they've maybe ended up there in the first place. A little bit of education. Again, that could be going to therapy, that could be watching videos on family dynamics and things like that. Having an understanding about the dynamic, but also learning about themselves. This is where therapy is really useful. Learn about themselves, learn about the how and why we react to things, learn about our responses to things, our automatic responses. Sometimes we call them trauma responses, and they can
Mm.
be, but they're not always a trauma response, they are a learned response. It's like a
Mm-hmm.
cue, a social cue. This is what I do whenever this happens. So we learn about those kind of things. We also start to explore differences. Start to explore exceptions, the times when it's not always like that, the times when it wasn't always like that, the situations where we maybe were brave, maybe the times when we did take a risk, didn't work out the way we hoped, but it wasn't the apocalypse we expected. It was more like a limp indoor firework, it wasn't that big a deal. So we start to look at those. And then lastly, and there's a fellow YouTuber, guy called Jay Reed. I love how he phrases this. When we start to do that, then what we do is we start to learn to live in defiance. We start to
Mm.
defy those rules, those things that we're hardwired into, that no is a bad word. Other people are much more important. We are weak and powerless. We're selfish. We're whatever. The things we weren't allowed to do that we always wanted to do, but we were led to believe that we're bad or whatever. No, we go and do that. We go and we learn to play the guitar. We go and we learn to play the drums. We read that book that we were told was going to, pollute our mind with bad ideas. We watch those movies that we were told were just rubbish. No, we start to live in defiance, and each and every time we do that, the dissonance is going to be there. But I think what you find is when we're paying attention, the distress starts to decrease.
Mm.
We start to become more resilient. We start to become a bit more courageous. We start to become a bit more confident, have a bit more faith in ourselves. We pay attention to the people that are treating us decently. We pay attention to the decent people who are fine with our no.
Mhm.
We start to pay a bit more attention to ourselves. That
True.
sounds very, very broad, but there is no one way. I'm just being very general with some of the things that
Mhm.
can.
Absolutely. Darren, we know trauma echoes across generation, often
Mhm.
unconsciously. I would want to know, what are your thoughts? I mean, how do the unhealed wounds of a narcissistic parent get transmitted into the survivor's own parenting, relationships, or even career choices? What are your thoughts?
Well, again, it's the thing about narcissism. There's this debate: is it nature, or is it nurture?
Mm,
It's probably above my pay grade to give you a definitive answer, but I do believe that it's a bit of both. I do believe
mhm,
it's a bit of both. You might have a child who has the same genetic components or whatever it would be called, so they're maybe going to grow up to be narcissistic as well. It might manifest differently. You might have had a very covert parent, vulnerable parent, but the child grows up to
mm,
be very grandiose, but maybe in an altruistic way. They'll
mm,
get their narcissistic supply through being the most generous, amazing person on the face of the planet. They're so selfless, they're wonderful. Behind closed doors, they're an absolute monster, but publicly, they're amazing. Or it might go the other way. They might have had a very grandiose parent. They might grow up to be covert.
mm,
They learned to get what they needed by being a bit more under the radar. Whereas the grandiose narcissist kind of turns up with a fanfare. They'll tell you to your face how amazing they are. The covert narcissist, they might grow up like that, and that's more, the grandiosity is still there, but it's more internalized, and you get a lot of low mood, anxiety, depression, because no one is seeing how amazing and special they are. So
mm,
it can happen that way if it's genetic and learned. Sometimes that is gonna manifest then on into their parenting. They're gonna, like we all learn from our parents in some way or another.
mhm,
It just carries on for another generation, unless the cycle
mhm.
stops, unless they become aware and they do a bit of work on themselves, maybe.
True.
That being said, the children who do grow up, and I gave you the example of those two families where the children have united. They're very supportive to each other. They keep an eye on each other, and every time the parents contact them to do a bit of manipulation, no, they're straight on the phone to each other, contact like, okay, this is what we're doing. This is what they're saying this time. How are we best going to manage this? As a group. So you can have that, and what you might find is With some kids that were in narcissistic families, as they grow up, what they want is for their children to be better than they were. They want the children not just to have a better upbringing than they have, but they want them to be better people than they were when they were young, given what they had to go through, given what they were raised in, the environment that they were raised in. They want them to be strong. They want them to have a sense of pride in themselves. They want them to be good, decent people. They want them to have compassion and empathy for other people, but with boundaries. They want them to be assertive. They want them to be ambitious. Again,
True.
it's never a one size fits all. It's very hard to
Mhm.
drill down
I
in.
totally understand your standpoint. Um, Darren, I mean, now there's something about triggers that I want to know your views on. I mean, I have observed even decades later, survivors can be triggered
Mm.
by a certain tone of voice, a kind of a dismissive glance, or, subtle invalidation. I mean, it's triggering. I have seen them, literally, like a machine gun, they are charging up and they are ready to explode and shoot. I would want to know, Darren, from your experience, why do these micro triggers cut so deeply? And what does that tell us about the nervous system of someone who's been raised by a narcissist?
Well, that's the thing about trauma. The trauma isn't necessarily the event itself. And especially with complex trauma, it's not a one-off. It's a series of things. And it's not always
Mm,
the same thing, but it's a series of things that lead someone to where they are. The trauma isn't always the event. The trauma is in the nervous system. It's how we carry it. And it's what it means to us. It's the impact it has had on us. Now, if something is very deeply ingrained, it went on for a long time, we were raised in that environment or whatever, or maybe it was a long-term 5, 10, 20-year relationship, it can be very, very deeply ingrained. Now, each and every time we're triggered, the trigger is something external, and it's a sensory thing. Sight, sound, touch, smell, that sort of thing. It's something sensory. So we see something, we hear something, we taste something, smell something, whatever, and there's something that happens in us. What that brings up is an emotional reminder. Now, even if we don't remember a specific incident, we certainly do remember how it felt. And that's what's triggered, the emotional memory. And what we often do is we might find ourselves doing what we did back then. We're scanning for not just danger, but escape route as well at the same time. What happens when we are triggered? There's part of us, that part of our brain that's hardwired to look for danger. It's like yesterday's threat is present today.
mhm.
Yesterday's situation is present today, or I'm right back there, whatever, but one way or another. And that's when we react the way we do. Now, there are different ways to get through this. When it comes to looking at trauma, what we cannot do, and you and I talked briefly just before we were recording, what we cannot do is we cannot erase the past. What we can do is we find ways to integrate into our experience the things that happened
Mhm.
in a way that if we're going to think about them, it's voluntary rather than involuntary. So we're not getting flashbacks, waves of memories, things like that. Um, we also learn, and it's not that we don't get triggered, it's not that things aren't going to happen, but it's the difference between going straight into survival mode, maybe leaping straight to 100, and maybe going to a 10 or a 20. The trigger informs us. It doesn't dictate what we do next. This looks familiar. This feels familiar. I've been through this before. What I did last time, did it work? Did it not? Would it be appropriate for this situation? We look for some. I like to use the example. It's like someone who was maybe in battle or something, and the door slams, they hear a loud noise and they jump. They might scan the room instantly. They might dive under the table. They might grab the person next to them to try and protect them. But it was only a door slam. Again, yesterday's threat's present today. When they learn to recognize their triggers and they're integrating into their experience, and they do in different ways, they start to update their memory and they start to look at the different areas in which they're growing. Um, the next time the door slams, they will jump, but they'll recognize everybody jumped. It was just an unexpected noise. It was a normal reaction. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't. Do you know what I mean? So it's going to a 10 or a 20 rather than going straight to 100 and believing we're right back in that situation. So somebody sees the look on that person's face, or they hear that tone of voice, they recognize and they know what it brings up in them. But they've updated their memory. They realize they're maybe not 8 years old anymore. They're an adult. They're an autonomous adult. They have every bit as much power as the person in front of them. They're not more powerful, they're not less powerful, they both have the same, and they can interact as adults. They can be assertive, they don't have to be aggressive. They can accept, maybe I was wrong this time, this person is right, they've just lost their temper because I was being stubborn. They can do that without feeling as if they've backed down yet again.
Mm-hmm.
They're just, if you will, they're taking more control over themselves. Now, again, that can be a very long process, depending on what it was, depending on how deeply ingrained it is, and depending on that person's own, I suppose, their own experiences as much as their support network and everything around them. There's so many variables, but it is something. It is possible, and it is something that a lot of people work on in therapy.
True. Now, here's an interesting thing, Darren. I mean, um, ever since, I went no contact with my narcissistic family, restarted my studies, and, had this urge inside of me to, help others who are in
Mm,
similar situation. I think it was there. I mean, the savior complex was there, that I need to rescue others as well who have gone through the voiceless and all of that. But now, of course, that savior has sailed onto a different journey. But yeah, I mean, the work should go on. I have seen, Darren, critiques often dismiss this concept, narcissistic parenting, toxic parenting. And I really, I mean, at the deepest of my heart, I don't see them as critiques or skeptics. I see them as
mm,
enablers and,
mm,
future narcissists, who target, and, they come up with all, different kinds of
yeah,
logic. They will also, tell you that, all parents are flawed.
absolutely.
Aren't you scapegoating them by, labeling them as narcissists? Now, here's the question, Darren, from a diagnostic and therapeutic lens. I mean, whatever years of experience you have, working with other individuals and helping them, how, according to you, we can differentiate, between ordinary parental imperfections and the entrenched pathology of narcissistic parenting?
I think this is where social media has to take a lot of responsibility. On one hand, it's a good thing because we have instant communication, things like that, instant information. It's wonderful. We have YouTube. You and I are both on YouTube. It's really good.
Mm-hmm.
But then there is the other side of that where the word narcissist, it refers to someone who doesn't agree with you. It refers to someone who won't give you what you want. It refers to someone you don't like. Do you know what I mean? Rather than using it in its true clinical sense. Now, what I would say is it doesn't matter whether it's narcissism or not, because sometimes you could be dealing with someone, they're very rigid, okay? Stick to the rules, they're very rigid. That's not narcissism, that's maybe obsessive compulsive personality. Do you know what I mean? Um,
Mm,
you really look for the long term repeated patterns of behavior. Parents are not perfect. Parents get it wrong because we forget that our parents had parents and those parents got them wrong too. Okay? None of us are perfect. There is no right way of doing things. The difference is most people tend to learn and they tend to grow.
mm,
And they
mhm.
tend to, even if it's not easy for us, we will take responsibility and we will apologize. Even to our kids, we will apologize because we got it wrong. We blamed them thinking it was they that did this, and turns out it wasn't. With narcissism, you wouldn't get that. With narcissism, you see that sense of entitlement, you will see that self-righteousness, you will see that bizarre ability they think they have to be able to read minds and predict the
Mm.
future. They know everybody else's motives, everybody is out to get them. Within this family unit, there's very much a them and us kind of environment is kind of encouraged. There's a pseudo hostility. There's a pseudo mutuality, both going on at the same time. The communication, it's like I don't know if this is the right way of phrasing it. I hope this comes out right. There's like a communication deviance, so things aren't
Mm.
just communicated directly.
Mm.
There's hints, there's insinuations, there's things carried through a third party triangulation. Um, there's that public image versus the private image. There are things. This is why I often think that families operate like cults. Narcissistic families operate like cults because
True.
there are things, questions you are not allowed to ask. And there's also answers you're not allowed to question.
Wow. True.
So there's all of this going on. There is, again, the kids being put into these roles, maybe having to do housework from a very young age, and it's not just that they're helping mum out, no, this is actually your role, this is your duty. Given far too much responsibility, being blamed on things that are way out of their frame of reference. There's a lot of bickering, there's a lot of gossiping, the list goes on. But anyway, all of this is going on, and there's only a facade of openness. There's a facade of closeness. The love is conditional. The positive regard is conditional. Everything is conditional. And everything that happens masks this pain. Everybody has to mask their pain. Unless you fall over and hurt yourself, of course you're going to cry. But it's like I said earlier about things being used to insult and humiliate you, that kind of
Mm.
sadistic humor. There's a lot of stuff left unsaid, so there's a lot of suppressed needs. There's a lot of unresolved issues, and there's a lot of things that not even just the kids, but maybe even the partner are afraid to ask for or afraid to bring up. There's a lot of different stuff going on, and this is happening all day and every day. This is not mum or dad had a hard day and they've lost their temper, or they've just become frustrated, or they made a promise and then broke it. Don't worry, I'll take you to the movies tonight, kids. Don't worry. They don't get going to the movies, but that's because dad has been stuck in traffic or mum has been stuck in traffic and they were late home. So it's nobody's fault. It's just unfortunate. So there are those disappointments, those things that happen. But in a narcissistic family, there will be the promise, but then the promise is suddenly forgotten about. They just said what was in their head. They didn't follow it through. And if they don't follow it through, it's the kid's fault, by the way. They didn't do what was in the parent's head. There's a lot of that stuff going on. In the ordinary families, as I say, there's going to be a lot of mistakes, but the parents tend to learn from it. They might even apologize. They might even make up to the kids. Whereas with the narcissistic family, rather than the hug, the kiss, the apology, and maybe a surprise treat or whatever, it's either ignored. If you don't talk about it, it's not there. And don't bring it up.
True. I would like to add a couple of things over here.
Sure.
In healthy family, I have seen. I mean, I had a lot of friends. I have a lot of friends now also, and there is this equal reciprocity.
Hmm.
Everyone is talking, everyone is reciprocating. Okay, I can disagree, but at least we can sit on a table and talk about things.
Yeah.
I mean, it's okay. We are happy with differences, but we are a family. But in narcissistic family, it's almost like a cult. There is a god that is this narcissist, and he has laid out 10 commandments that you need to follow. And if you, God forbid, if you, fail
I,
to follow those commandments,
yeah.
you are doomed.
I call them, depending whether it's the mum or dad, what you're looking at the head of the narcissistic family is either a matriarch or a patriarch. And the
Yeah,
term I use is the grand worshipful master, or
good
she who must
one.
she who must be obeyed.
Mm, true. And one more thing, that I have observed is that, you are all the time confused in narcissistic family.
Yeah.
You don't know who you are. You on the inside, you know that you are XYZ, but on the outside, you will almost feel that you have a role to play. And if you
Mm,
step out of the role, boom, everything is gone. You don't have a father, you don't have a mother, you don't have a sibling. There is a lot to lose when you are choosing yourself in a narcissistic family. There
yeah.
is a lot of things that you would be losing, whether it's inheritance, your relationship with the sibling. I mean, it operates like a cult. And the most important thing is that none of your mistakes will be pardoned or forgiven. You will be punished.
Narcissism is one of those, a trait of narcissism that's not often talked about, but I believe is common throughout the whole spectrum, is narcissistic people have a very long memory. In
Mm,
spite of their what has been described as toxic amnesia, where they forget the
mm,
bad things they do, I
mm,
have met people throughout my life, I've met people who were in their 50s and their 60s, and they would still be talking about something somebody said to them when they were at school, or something somebody said
mm,
to them when they were in their 20s, or something that
mhm,
somebody said to them back in the 80s or back in the 90s. And they are still holding on to that, still waiting for the day when they get their comeback, when they get to say that very thing that's going to put that person in their place. Very,
mm.
very long memory. That wound stays with them for a very long time. And a lot of the time it's so petty. You wouldn't, well, I would hazard a guess, even the people I'm thinking about, see if they met that person. The person probably doesn't even remember them.
Hmm.
Probably person
True.
probably doesn't even know who they are.
You are right. I have observed that, and I think that usage of that kind of a memory helps them to justify their action and abusive response. They're
Yeah,
waiting for the right time to just jump on you, pounce on you, and hurt you, and then they will justify. I mean, they have everything,
yeah.
every detail recorded, that this date, this time, from this hour to this hour, witching hour, you were being toxic, you did this, you violated, you did this and that. So I think they are good in record keeping. And that record keeping manifests as, I mean, in Asia I have seen, as giving payback reminder to the children also. In a lot of families I have seen that it's a very common thing, that
Mm,
whatever they have bought a pencil box for you, they have bought a book for you, they have bought a candy for you, whatever. They keep a record of everything. My father had the receipts of everything that he had spent on me from the time
mm,
I was born, the hospital thing, everything. And he had maintained a file, he had maintained files, the money he had spent on me, the money he had spent on my sister, on his wife. And he used to literally show us those files if ever we used to mess up with the marks. I mean, the environment in the house was, as it is, horrible, unpredictable.
mm.
I mean, how do you expect a kid to perform well in the school if you are fighting every day, if you are
Yeah.
giving payback reminder, I've spent so much on you. I don't think healthy parents do that. They keep a record of it. And in a way, growing up, I literally felt indebted, that I need to get this, debt off my shoulder. I need
Maybe
to
that
pay back.
maybe that was the point of it.
Mm,
Yeah.
true. True.
You have to be grateful.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a story. This is a true story.
Mm-hmm.
It's a friend of mine. If you
Mm-hmm.
remember, I think back in the 1990s, do you remember the Power Rangers?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Common.
It's thankfully I was too old for it by then. I wasn't watching it, but
Uh-huh.
I knew
I
this
used
guy.
to. Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm older than you, that's why. But I knew a guy who was a huge Power Rangers fan,
Wow.
and he had the little toys and things, and he watched it every Saturday morning. I think it's somebody a huge Power Rangers fan, And there was this thing happened in the town where I live, Belfast. I think there were the Power Rangers were going to be appearing at this thing. Now, you know as well as I do, it was probably 4 or 5 people just wearing the outfits, and they're just gonna
Like a
turn up.
Comic Con?
Something like that. I think they were
Uh-huh.
at the opening of a shop or something. They were doing something.
Oh.
But anyway,
Mhm.
they were just gonna be there, wave and get pictures taken, sign a few autographs. And this is back in the
Mhm.
90s, like. My friend had wanted to go. Desperately,
Mm.
desperately, desperately wanted to go. He was excited, he was climbing the walls, he was so excited. On the day they were going, they got into the town, and of course there was a crowd, there was a queue. And the mum said, "Oh, I'm not queuing up. I'm not queuing up for that. I'm not queuing." And he started to get very upset, and she lost her temper. And she actually
Oh,
shouted at the
wow.
dad. He told me, shouted at the dad, "Just take him home. Get him out of my sight. Take
Mhm.
him," which is what the dad did.
Mhm.
Then he told me that later on he's sitting in his room, staring into space, crying his heart out. He was stunned by what had happened. The mum turned up afterwards and gave him this piece of paper with 5 names on it and says, "I queued up and got those autographs for you." And for the rest of her days, she would every now and again remind him how good of her it was to get the Power Rangers autographs for him.
Oh god.
Every time she did it, he says, every time she did it, I'm not thinking about how good she was. I am thinking about her angry reaction and screaming to get me out of her sight to take her home. That's my memory of that day, and yet her memory is completely different. I'm supposed to be grateful. He says, for all I know, she lifted a bit of paper and did it herself. I wouldn't know.
So true.
That's the nature of, again, with narcissism, that memory. You have to be eternally grateful. That thing I did for
Absolutely.
you, you are now
Even
forever.
if it is bare minimum.
Yeah, you are forever in my debt. And let me put it this way: you give your example. You were talking about your dad.
Mm.
How many parents get a pat on the back and told, "Well done, you fed and clothed your kids"? I mean, that sounds to me like that's his job, really.
Absolutely.
you know,
Absolutely. I mean, it's parents' job. I mean, if I choose to have a child, I don't need to run around with the list of things I've done for him or her. I mean,
Mm,
no. I just do the best I can, and then I say, please learn to fly. Let me work for my retirement. That's it. I'm
yeah,
there. You have my back, but please now go and explore and do whatever you want in your life. That's it. That's my role as a parent.
yeah.
But these parents are, I don't know, they're different level. I mean, I personally, it might be very controversial, but I think, addressing them as parent is, maligning the term parenting, because parenting, according to me, is a very sacred thing. It's a very beautiful thing. I mean, it can make or break the child. Parenting is really an amazing thing. But looking at these individuals, I mean, it's so bad. It's so transactional, instrumental, and conditional. But parenting, it's everything else apart from parenting. So I mean, mhm,
No, I would agree. I would think of parenting as it's a huge responsibility, but it's also an
true.
incredible adventure at the same time. You get both.
Yep.
But you're right. I think in those families, narcissistic families, the love is very conditional. A lot of things are very transactional as well. The children are like an extension of the parent in some cases.
Mhm.
They're living vicariously through them. Now, we're all proud of our kids. We love it when they bring home an egg box that painted green and sellotape the straw to it, and we're going, "Isn't that wonderful?" We're very proud of it and the little things they do.
Mm.
Um, with a narcissistic parent, they'll say, "Oh, isn't that wonderful?" But the child would bring it home and present it. They'll look at it and go, "Right, okay," and then lift the remote control and watch the TV. There's nothing. A lot of the time with narcissism, I think because it's transactional, it's what's in it for them. It's what they get out of it.
Absolutely. It's all about the supply. I mean,
Mm,
as long as you're resourceful, as long as I can harvest supply out of you, good. But
mhm.
if I see that, there is less chances and you're unable to give me, I will have to discard you. Either I do it directly or I make you feel as if you're not needed and wanted, and then you take a leave, and then I stage it as if you have just run away. I did so much and you just abandoned us, rather than me making you feel a certain way and leaving. So I mean, they're smart people. I have to give that. Narcissistic individuals are
Some
smart.
definitely are. I mean, it's not that they're when you say smart, I would think it's not just you're talking intelligence. Sometimes we're talking emotional intelligence as well. I
Absolutely.
because I think it's incredible. You could meet someone who they could, design a time machine. They know about, dimensional engineering. They could rewrite the laws of physics, quantum mechanics.
Yeah.
They're incredibly intelligent people.
Yeah. Yes.
Emotionally, it's like talking to maybe an 8-year-old.
A nefarious 8-year-old.
Yeah, yeah, a very self-absorbed, very entitled 8-year-old who's just been told, "No, you're not allowed that." Um, so yeah, it's the emotional intelligence as much as anything. So yeah, you can get someone who can be very manipulative. They're doing things. They're switching roles in the children. They're taking the crown off the golden child. They're giving it the scapegoat just to watch the golden child struggle. They might even be getting some kind of pleasure out of the child's distress. Maybe there is that sadistic element to them as well. They are enjoying the unkind humor. They are making jokes. They are embarrassing. They are humiliating. But they're also making up excuses. They are blame shifting. They are not taking responsibility. Now, on some level, they know they're doing it, but they don't know why they're doing it. If you know what I mean, they don't know why they're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more like an unconscious thing, I believe. It's more as this unconscious defense mechanism. They're being very wily. They're this need, this hyper competitiveness, this need to be superior. They know it's there, but I don't know why it's there. They don't they this lack of humility. They know they don't have humility. They're actually seeing humility as a weakness or a flaw, but they don't know why. Do you know what I mean? So they can be very
Mm.
intelligent people, but there's not a lot of emotional intelligence.
True. And you said that narcissistic parents are sadistic. Here's something that I want to
Can be.
add over here. Okay, here's something that I would like to add. I have seen and I have experienced narcissistic parents really, hitting their children and then putting the balm and then hitting them again. So, I mean, that shows that, they know that they are never going to run away because they're dependent on me.
Mhm.
So I can exercise anything I want and please. And then maybe in order to distort the child's memory, I'll apply the balm. I'll help the child
Yeah,
heal, recover, and patch up. And then again, I'm going to do the same thing and pretend as if nothing happened, and keep narrating their version of
yeah.
story. I saved you, I rescued you, I patched you up, and you're blaming me.
And that's yeah, absolutely. And again, that's a form of the gaslighting, and that is, as we discussed earlier, that is
Hmm.
being led to believe that the only person who can help you is the person who's hurting you
Absolutely.
because they're doing both. Um,
Hmm.
and yeah, that brings up. There's a. Have you ever watched that movie, The Marathon Man?
No,
Oh, it's
no.
it's 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 an odd movie. It's a good movie. It's an odd movie though. But there's a scene in
Mhm,
it that I think really shows that, and it's the very sadistic side.
mhm.
You get in not specifically narcissism, but more the dark personality types. Okay, where there
Three
is an
archetypes.
element of
Mhm,
where there is an element of sadism. And it's
mhm.
this guy. He was a doctor. He was a dentist during the Second World War, and he's looking for these stolen diamonds. And he has poor Dustin Hoffman strapped into a chair. He's going to torture him to find out where the diamonds are. And what he does is he takes a drill and he drills it right through the front of his tooth. And,
God.
it's a scene that just makes you go, oh, because you can just imagine the pain that poor Dustin Hoffman's in.
Yeah.
But after he does that, and he's polite and pleasant the whole time, he doesn't raise his voice, and he doesn't threaten. He's just polite and pleasant as he says, I need you to tell me where the diamonds are. I want to know where they are. And he does that. After that, he gives him a little bottle of clove oil for the pain. And that one little scene, what it shows is how some people in that dark personality where you see psychopathy and sadism and Machiavellianism
Mm,
as well as the narcissism, when you see
mm,
all that together, that's someone being conditioned to believe the person who hurts them is the person who can help them, heal them. Now, that's a very graphic
true.
scene in a movie, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
But as you mentioned, with the parent who smacks, beats, punishes, takes toys away, things like that, is also
Mm,
the same parent who gives the little treats once in a while, who lets you stay up late, who lets you have a sleepover at your friend's house, who lets you have a birthday party. It's the same parent.
mm-hmm.
So the person who hurts us is the person who helps us and heals us.
True. True. Now, Darren, I personally describe shame as the toxic inheritance of narcissistic parenting,
Hmm.
which is invisible but coercive. I would want to know what, according to you, I mean, why does shame become such a central and enduring legacy? And how does it show up in, you know, a survivor's relationships and self narrative? What are your thoughts?
I think when we look at what shame is and we define what we mean by shame, because we're going to feel different degrees of shame. Embarrassment. We feel embarrassed when, we trip on the curb and the pavement. We feel a bit embarrassed. People saw us. Shame is something different. It's a lot more intense. It's a lot deeper than that. And sometimes it's hard to differentiate between shame and guilt.
Mm,
A lot of time in narcissistic relationships, narcissism, I believe, is this: you see people who behave in the most shameful of ways to try to escape a feeling of shame, which is why they will lie through their teeth. They will talk around in circles. They will roll about on the floor, kicking their legs in the air, squealing to get out of taking any kind of responsibility. So that's very shameful behavior. And they're doing that to try and escape a feeling of shame that they were wrong or they're accountable. They also target people's shame and guilt. It's one of the things they
mm,
do. What would people think of you if they knew what you did to me by saying no? What would people think of
mm,
you if whatever? So there's your fear of public opinion, your fear of other people's opinion. After all I've done for you, things like that. But guilt is what we feel whenever we think of the consequences of something we've done or maybe
mm,
neglected to do. And that can be targeted and exploited if you're a compassionate person, if you're hyper dependent on someone else for validation, and if you're dependent on them for their approval and things like that. That's something that's going to be exploited. Your guilt. You always have to give them what you want or you're a bad person. Shame is what you feel. Guilt is what you feel when you think of the consequences of something you've done. Shame is what you feel when someone else is thinking about it.
mm-hmm.
The difference.
True.
And that's when you get those threats of, what if other people knew you were like, what if, how could you say that to me after all I've done? What would this person think if I told them that? So that targets our guilt and our shame. Another aspect of shame is what we feel when we think about what we are. I like to add to that what we've been led to believe we are. We have gone back to our beliefs from earlier. We have been led to believe we're a bad, horrible, selfish person for saying no.
Mm,
We're a bad, horrible, selfish person for not putting this person in front of ourselves, for not worshipping, for not complying. This does stay with us. Again, people find it hard to assert themselves. They try to avoid conflict. Sometimes you see the people pleasing behaviors. Sometimes you can see what's known as egoism, which is like the extreme opposite of narcissism. That's when someone is afraid of maybe being seen as narcissistic because they have any boundaries at all. Um, According to the legend, Echo had no voice of her own, only Narcissus' voice. She just repeated everything he said. I think shame, like all of the things that we don't like, all those feelings we don't like, we understand why we don't like it and what it brings up. And what we can do is we can use it to regulate our behavior. It doesn't have to be toxic. It doesn't have to be a bad thing. It stops us maybe doing bad things and doing stupid things. But it doesn't have to hold us back. And if that shame is what we're thinking about what we are, and that's bringing up shame in us, remember what I said, what we were led to believe we are, which is very different.
True.
A lot of
I
time.
don't know if. Mhm.
No, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to add a little bit over here. I don't know if you are aware of Friedrich Nietzsche's work, "Thus Spake Zarathustra." I mean, it's an amazing, work. And in that also he says how men have been conditioned, based on guilt and shame.
Hmm.
And, their, inability to say no, and why it shapes the morality. The more you are able to say yes, the more moral high grounds you will be getting, the more morally fit you will be seen. And the more no you say, the more you are under the radar of scrutiny. I mean, being
Hmm.
scrutinized by religion or moral value or some
Hmm.
ethic and all of that. And that's exactly what you mentioned, that we are scared of the idea of others seeing us in a certain way and believing someone else's narrative rather than caring about what we are going through or what we are experiencing. We are scared others not labeling us. We often operate out of that fear. And
Yeah.
what if auntie says that I'm a selfish girl? What if uncle says I'm a bad boy? I don't want that. I want to be
Mm.
seen as good. So yeah, I think that is also something which these narcissistic parents, toxic parents, they exploit. They
Yeah.
scare us,
They.
and that's how. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just going to say that
No, no. Please continue. Please continue. Yeah.
narcissistic people tend to leverage the things that are important to you.
Yeah.
Whatever that is, by the way, it could even be your personal property, but it's maybe things like your reputation.
Yeah.
It's things like public opinion. It's things like your money, your finances, whatever it is. Even as a child, it's your favorite toys, things like that. Um, there's a scene in the book "Mommy Dearest." There's part of the book where Christina Crawford. Are you familiar with the book? It's the story of
Yes.
Joan Crawford. Well,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
Christina Crawford, the daughter. She had this favorite doll or something like that. This wonderful little doll. As all children do. They have a favorite toy, and
Mm-hmm.
Joan Crawford made her give it to charity.
Oh God.
So she
Mm.
gets to look really good and altruistic giving stuff to charity. She gets to look really good and altruistic, teaching her children to give to charity. She also gets to slap her daughter in the face by making her part with her favorite toy. So they will always leverage things that are important to you, and that is going to be, you could boil that down to things like your reputation. So there's often
True.
threats. That's why I said the most common threat I think you'll hear from any narcissistic person is always going to boil down to, I want to tell people what you're really like.
Mm.
Or what if I rang your work and told them what if you rang my work, I mean, they'd probably think you're crazy, but go ahead, float your boat, buddy, whatever you want. But they think if I If people hear these things about you, you're going to feel really bad. So they're playing on your fear of rejection and disapproval because they have seen that you struggle with their rejection and disapproval. So they can ramp that up a scale publicly. Now, something I often say to people, I've said this on my channel many times. If a narcissistic person threatens that they're going to tell people what you really like, reframe that in your own head. What they're really saying is, I'm either going to tell people about the things I blame you for. So all of a sudden it sounds different, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I'm either going to tell people about the things I blame you for, or I can't get you to do what I want, so I'm going to make something up to embarrass you.
True. So true.
Yeah.
Now, Darren, here's a very, provocative question that I, want to ask you. Now, this is difficult but necessary, and we all know not every survivor will fully transcend their origins. Now, I would want to know, Darren, do you believe some people never completely heal from narcissistic parents? If so, what does functional recovery look like versus idealized healing?
Again, it's going to be different for everybody. The question I would ask is, what does healing look like? What does it mean? And everyone's going to give you different answers. Some people will say things like, I want to, if it was something not necessarily a family upbringing, but it could be a relationship, I want to go back to the way I was beforehand. Okay. Well, what we cannot do is we cannot rewrite the past, cannot change history. And that's the same with the family. So you can't go back to where you were because it was there your whole life. It's like I said earlier, it's about integrating things into our experience where it doesn't, I wouldn't say it doesn't bother us, but it doesn't have the impact on us. It doesn't have the control over us. It's I like what Jung said. It's, I am not what happened to me. It is not my identity. He said, was it, I'm not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become. There is something quite empowering about choosing a different path. And this is the thing about trauma. Trauma can affect us all in many different ways. But from about the 80s, maybe 90s onward, we're looking at things like post-traumatic growth, the things that people learn through their trauma. Things like there's an appreciation for things that they didn't have previously. And that can be an appreciation for even just the simple things in life. A little bit of common decency, a nice dinner, good company, things like that. There can be a personal strength. People can learn to become assertive without being aggressive and abusive. The person that raised them or the person they were with got what they wanted by being manipulative and by being abusive, by being coercive. And there is a strength in that person where they have made this conscious decision not to be like that. Like I said earlier, there can be that conscious decision. I will raise my children differently. I will raise my children better because I want my children to be better than I was, to have a better life than I had. Okay, so there can be that kind of strength. There's there can be an openness, and this is something that often comes with therapy and so on. There's an openness to new experiences. I want to learn new things. Going back to, I mentioned earlier on, that YouTuber Jay Reid, you live in defiance. You have the kind of friends that mum and dad disapproved of. You listen to the music that they said was rubbish. You stay up whatever time you want. You don't have to go to bed at 8:30. You learn to play that musical instrument. You read those books. You watch that movie. There's an openness. You can give yourself permission to try new things and give yourself permission to change your mind if you don't like it.
True.
Often with narcissism, there's this dichotomy of yes or no, right, wrong, black, white, up, down, whatever. Do you know what I mean? It's either this or it's this. Um, People who have experienced trauma, whenever they develop this openness, no, it's not a dichotomy. It's not black or white. It's a whole spectrum. It's a whole wonderful world of possibility and opportunity. There are things like nuance. There is things like context.
Mm.
There can be a compassion. There can be an empathy, not the kind of empathy that some people maybe exploit, like narcissistic people would exploit, but there is an empathy with boundaries. You can care about, and you can support, and you can encourage, but you're not there to fix. The difference, I
True.
like to say, it's the difference between caring about and caring for. You can recognize those things. So, and some people even find a spiritual growth. Well, whether that's religion, could be anything. But there's a lot of different ways that people grow. What you find as well is some people go into a line of work. Think of yourself. You mentioned your upbringing. Some people can go into a line of work where they end up helping other people who have been through the same kind of thing because they have a compassion, they have an empathy, and they understand it. They get it. People that have been in terrible disasters and accidents,
Hmm.
same thing. They might go on to help others. No one else is ever. I don't want anyone else to ever have to go through what I had to go through. I'm going to put a stop to this. I'm going to campaign against it. So there are so many different areas that people can grow, and the healing doesn't mean it never happened. Because sometimes we still have the scars, but what we're not going to do is we're not going to pick at the scars every now and again.
Yeah.
See them and they remind us, but we're not going to keep picking them or poking them with a stick or whatever.
True.
But
Uh,
everybody's journey is different, and there's different ways. And I think what I often say, depending on what it is, especially you mentioned earlier on the enmeshment, the emotional entanglement, and things like that. If we find it hard to move on, it can be because of the entanglement. There's a lot of emotional entanglement and so on.
mm, true.
If we pay attention and we start to move forward in little, small, safe little steps, a little piece at a time, we start to move forward. Sooner or later, the moving on catches up.
True. And I would like to add something over here. I mean, whatever you said, I totally agree. And I don't remember where I read, but it was by Jung. Jung had said that until you make the, I think, unconscious conscious, it will, direct your life,
Yeah,
and you will keep calling it as
yeah,
fate. And that's what exactly I think we are talking over here, that until and unless we don't bring our awareness onto the hidden patterns, there is no moving forward.
yeah.
How can we
Um,
heal?
it's. I mean, you talked about as well about the shadow self. The shadow self. I think the shadow self is a really interesting concept in
Mm,
the sense that me in our shadow are all the parts of us that are unacceptable. They're not just unacceptable to us, they're unacceptable to other people. Now, we think it's all the bad stuff, and some of it is, okay? But some of that stuff is stuff we've been led to believe is bad. And when we start to, you say, make the unconscious conscious, we start to
mm,
integrate those parts of our shadow self into ourselves. We start to own them. This is the difference with narcissistic people. Remember, they are flawless, they are perfect. And
yes.
I don't think I have ever met a narcissistic person yet who hasn't said to me, "I am self-aware." Of course you are. But narcissistic people don't believe they have a shadow self. That's an alien concept to them. When we integrate those parts into us, the bits that we don't like, the part, we're capable of lying. We don't like doing it, but we are capable of it. We can be greedy. We can eat the whole cake and hope that no one notices, you know. But there are other parts of us that we were led to believe was bad. For instance, saying no is bad, so that gets pushed into our shadow.
Mm.
When we start to reel these things back in and we start to pay attention to them, we can bring them out. We use them when we need to. We're in control of them. They're not in control of us. You say we'll just keep on calling it fate. No, we're taking more control over it. We can say no in a healthy way. I always like to say to people, no is a complete sentence.
Mm-hmm. True.
Um, when you start to integrate those parts into yourself and you're aware of the things you can be capable of, which doesn't mean you're going to do them, by the way. And it doesn't mean you're going to turn into a mad, crazy Hannibal Lecter. That's not what I'm suggesting. But you're aware of you can be greedy. You choose not to be. You can be selfish. You choose not to be. You might be selfish in this situation, but that's not really selfish. That's more self-interest. And that's a completely different thing. So when we do that, we have a lot more control. Now, the poor old narcissist over here is still running around in circles in their head because they don't have a shadow self. They're already perfect and flawless. And they do not like this new version of you that is saying things like no, that is saying things like, oh, I don't know, well, what if I tell people about you and why would you do that? What would be the point of that? What would you get out of that? We are responding, we're not reacting.
True.
And whenever we, at some point, recognize the difference between caring and caring about, yeah, if they want help, we'll do it, but we're not doing it for them.
True. Darren, I personally feel healing is a painful process.
Oh, yeah.
It's not easy that, I book a session with Darren or Sarah or XYZ, and they're going to give a pill, red pill and blue pill. I need to choose, and boom, I'm a new person. I don't think so. It happens that way. And, this reminds me again, of Jung, where Jung says that there is no coming to, consciousness without pain. So I think
Yeah.
healing itself is so, I really don't want to use the F word, but it's so painful. It is
It
not
can be.
easy.
It can
Yeah.
be. And it can bring up a lot of things. And is it even that shame that you talked about? It can bring up a
Yep.
shame. Some people can feel a shame over the things that happened to them.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Even if they were innocent victims at the time, even if they just happened to be there, there can be a lot of different ways of looking at it, and it can be a very, very difficult process to see it, as it was, to deconstruct that narrative that was given to you is probably a way, and to set your own narrative on it, an objective narrative, the truth. There's so many things can be hurtful. Also, to recognize as well, as I said, the person who was hurting you is the person who was supposed to love you.
Yeah. True. Darren, according to you, what are, the best framework or modality when it comes to, trying to heal and recover from, narcissistic abuse, especially, abuse by narcissistic parents? I personally feel, psychoanalytical approach, a little CBT does the work for me. And I personally, do take help of, somatic, work also, and breath work. That also helps. This is my recipe, when it comes
Yeah.
to helping the survivors, and of course, patching myself up as well, because there is, no healing for others unless I don't keep working on my own self, and I don't think I can fully be healed. And others also need to keep working. What are your thoughts? What are the best ways, to heal?
I um I work from an integrative approach, so I wouldn't say there is a best way. I think
Mm-hmm.
again, everybody's different. Some people are going to benefit from cognitive behavioral therapy. Some people might want to go more in depth and do some psychoanalytical work. Some people might want to do maybe some dialectical behavioral therapy. There's
DBT. Mm-hmm.
I like to think that I'm pragmatic enough to work collaboratively with whatever the person needs, whatever they think. Um, what I do think is very useful is to use a person-centered approach to help build the relationship. Because as Rogers often said, it's within the relationship that most of the work is done. This person needs to feel safe and comfortable to be able to talk about things that are very unsafe and uncomfortable. Okay, so a lot of uh,
Mm.
use use that to help build a relationship and rapport. Cognitive behavioral therapy can be useful. There are some useful little techniques there. Psychodynamic work is very useful as well. Person gets to learn about themselves as much, their relationship with themselves as well as their relationship with the outside world. I find I'm in recent years I'm really liking the work of DeShazer and Insu Kim in solution focused work. I really like the concept of, as much as when we're in therapy, it is often about looking at difficulties and deficits and things like that. I like the idea of exploring the exceptions and exploring strengths and preferred scenarios and things like that. I think I find a lot of people find that very helpful. Um, it's a way of helping empower people as well. It's coming up with their own solutions and stuff. So I wouldn't say it's a one size fits all. I wouldn't say there's any one particular one is better than others. You could be talking to um, you could be talking to a person-centered therapist, and they'll tell you their approach is the best. You could be talking to a psychodynamic therapist; they're going to tell you their approach is best. Um, I tend to be pragmatic. Whatever works, whatever the person needs, and as long as I can help them with it, then.
True. These days, even I'm exploring IFS framework, and
Mhm.
it's like very interesting. I mean, I think Mr. Schwartz, who's developed this IFS internal family system. Yeah, that's what it is. And it talks about different parts of you, the
Mhm.
firefighters in you, the managers, the
Mm.
unattached burdens. So I mean, it's a very new way to look at things. I mean, I'm not the right person to comment on it, but yeah, it's a kind of a next rabbit hole that I would love to get into because it's interesting and I like exploring
Yeah.
different ways, whatever makes sense. And as you said, it's not one thing for everyone. You need to design and tailor made
Mm.
things the best suited for others, for individual need. Now, before we conclude today's discussion, Darren, um, I would want to know, what first steps do you find most powerful when it comes to helping survivors disentangle from the narcissistic legacy and walk the path of reclaiming their authentic self? What are your thoughts?
Sorry, I'm just choking here. I hope you had it
Please,
right.
no worries.
I think the most powerful thing you can do to help anyone is, before you do anything, is to listen to them, hear them, ask them questions. Ask them questions with a polite curiosity to, to encourage them to tell their story. A lot of people who have been in narcissistic environments, this includes workplaces, cults, things like that, there's a huge element of secrecy.
Mm,
And with that gaslighting, as they're trying to tell you the story, they can be confused. Is this true? Is this the right way I remembered it? Or, do you know what I mean? There's a lot of confusion. I am a big believer in the power of listening. Listen to them, hear the story, show them that you're listening. As I say, ask little questions and so on. And when you're listening, you're not necessarily giving unnecessary feedback, but you can. Let me put it to you this way. I remember having a conversation with somebody once. This wasn't a client, by the way. This was a friend, so that's why I got away with saying it.
Mhm.
She was telling me about kind of she was talking she'd been with and the way he was behaving and so on, and the whole conversation was, and then he did this, and then he did that, and then he did that, and then he did that. And at one point, I just says to her, "Okay, look, okay, he sounds like a twat." I, and in that moment, I said that, she was just, what? I says, "Yeah, he sounds like an absolute twat." I says, "But you've talked about him enough. Tell me about you. What do you need to do next? You're telling me this for a reason. Do you want a bit of advice? Do you want me to tell you to dump him? Do you want me to tell you to what is it you want? What is it you think you need to do?" As I say, that wasn't the client, so I could be a lot more direct, if you know what I mean. There's a different way to do it. But I thought that conversation was a good one to highlight because it was showed that I was listening and I was giving a response based on what she was telling me. Sometimes when you're telling somebody a story and you're telling them about something like narcissistic abuse, you might be telling them a specific incident. And to anyone else, that specific incident sounds like you're blowing it out of proportion, or maybe you're a bit too sensitive, or come on, they might have been having a bad day. And this is very devaluing and hurtful to people who have had this kind of behavior for years. And what they don't realize, even with its best of intention, they're actually enabling the narcissistic person to get away with it. And
Oh,
they're telling
true.
them, they are telling that victim that there's maybe something wrong with them for talking about it. Just like the narcissistic person implanted in their head, not to be talking about
Mm.
it publicly. And again, they'll say things like, "Well, they're not like that around me. I've never seen them like that." Yeah, yeah, but you don't live with
Wow.
them. And as I say, even if it's with the best will in the world, even if they're just
Mhm.
trying to keep out of whatever it is, that is the last thing you want to tell someone. So when that person, to begin their path to healing, when they're telling you their story, listen to them. Don't jump in with, "Yeah, he sounds like a twat." Don't do that immediately. Um, listen to them. Allow them to tell their story. Show a curiosity. Show a concern. Ask questions, even if it's just for clarity, or even if it's just to continue, or to encourage them to continue. And you're doing it without judging them. You're doing it without telling them they're wrong. You're doing it without telling them, could there be another perspective here? No, you're not doing that. You're giving them that space to talk. I think that's the first thing, is to listen. People do not get, I think, the power of listening.
True. Um, I think what you have just said is true. And we all need to give them a safe space where they can open up without the fear of being judged
Mm,
and no scrutiny. And I can just speak my heart out and I won't be labeled and I won't be gaslit in return. I get that. That's there. I mean, I totally agree to that. Darren, what should be the first step of these survivors? What should they do if they want to embark on their healing journey, if they want to recover from narcissistic abuse? I mean, this is a very great suggestion that you have given. I mean, we all should practice that,
mm,
give lots of empathy, be respectful, hear them out. That's it. That's what
mm,
they are not getting. So give them that. I
yeah.
get that. But what do, suppose, I mean, I am the victim. What do I need to do first? Get someone who can listen to me, or what do I need to do? Or get rid of the narcissist? What do you think?
Go back to your initial question. What should someone do? A word I never use, certainly not in therapy, a word I never use is should. Now, some shoulds are a given, but I generally try not to use the word should.
Mhm.
What I say to people, if you are in that situation, if you are in an environment, I you ask yourself, there's something's clearly not working. Something's clearly hurting. Otherwise, you wouldn't be thinking about this. Otherwise, you wouldn't be watching conversations like this. You wouldn't be listening to podcasts. You wouldn't be watching YouTube. So you get a sense there's something wrong. And it is our default to sometimes think, what should I do? What should I do?
Mhm.
Question to ask yourself is, what do you need to do? Ask yourself, what can you do? Ask yourself, how do you do it? Also, if you find yourself you've been isolated, you've no friends, you haven't had contact with your family or whatever for whatever reason, um, it can be very difficult, the thought of reaching out and asking for help. I'd say do it anyway. Take the risk. Talk to someone. Talk to a counsellor, mental health professional. Talk to someone. Tell them. Tell them what's going on. You don't have to use words like narcissist. You don't have to do that. Just tell them about your experience, how life is for you at the minute, what's going on for you, what is it you're struggling with.
Sure.
But the first thing is, as I say, to seek some kind of help and support, whatever that looks like. But get some kind of help or support. Counselling's a good place to start, I think.
True. So thank you so much, Darren. It was such a wonderful conversation, and I'm looking forward to have you again for some
Oh,
other
absolutely.
interesting topic, and we can chat and we can share, thoughts. So thank you so much, Darren, for joining in today.
No problem. Thank you for having me on. I enjoyed our conversation.
Same here. Thank you.